She wasn't expecting him. The billionaire stormed into her house in anger, then froze when he saw the newborn in her arms. Part 2. The morning light filtered through the curtains of Victoria's Harbour's rest apartment, painting everything in shades of gold and possibility. Royal Roads was exactly 6 weeks old today, and Connor Drake stood in the kitchen making pancakes. Actual pancakes, not the burnt disasters of his first attempts 3 months ago, when he'd started teaching himself to cook through late-night video tutorials. "You're getting better at this," Victoria said from the doorway. Royal cradled against her chest in the carrier she'd learned to sleep in after particularly fussy nights. Connor flipped a pancake with unnecessary flourish. "I watched 23 YouTube videos. I'm practically a chef now. Let's not get ahead of ourselves." She moved closer, peering at the golden brown circles on the griddle. "But yes, these look actually edible." High praise from the woman who once told me my scrambled eggs had concerning texture. She laughed, and the sound still did something to his chest, made it tight and warm and terrifying all at once. 6 weeks since that explosive confrontation when he'd stormed into her apartment and discovered his daughter. 6 weeks of midnight feedings and shared coffee, and learning the difference between Royal's hungry cry and her tired cry. 6 weeks of building something he'd never experienced before, a partnership based on consistency rather than passion, on daily choice rather than dramatic gesture. The trial date loomed 3 weeks away, but for this morning, they had peace. Connor plated the pancakes, slightly uneven but perfectly golden, and carried them to the small kitchen table. Victoria settled into her chair, adjusting Royal in the carrier so she could eat one-handed, a skill she'd perfected over the past weeks. "I got a call from Detective Morrison yesterday," Connor said, drizzling maple syrup with careful precision. "The prosecution wants to meet with us before the trial. Go over testimony, prepare for cross-examination." Victoria's expression shifted, something shuddering behind her eyes. "When?" "Tuesday afternoon. Catherine Wells, the prosecutor, wants 3 hours with each of us separately, then an hour together. That's thorough. She doesn't want any surprises. Sable's defense team is expensive and aggressive. They'll come after every inconsistency, every gap in the timeline." Royal stirred against Victoria's chest, making small grunting sounds. Victoria automatically began the gentle swaying that soothed their daughter, the movement so practiced now it was unconscious. "I've been thinking about something," Connor said carefully. "About my father." Victoria looked up, surprise evident. Connor rarely spoke about his father beyond the basic facts everyone knew. Dead at 47, heart attack, left Connor orphaned and wealthy at 12. "What about him?" "The symptoms he had before he died. I've been going through old medical records, the ones Sable kept filed away in storage. Headaches, fatigue, digestive problems, the same things I experienced." Connor's jaw tightened. He was complaining about those symptoms for 6 months before the heart attack, and Sable was already working for him then. Victoria set down her fork. "Connor, you can't seriously think—" "Why not? She poisoned me. She isolated me from anyone who might interfere with her vision of my life. She intercepted your letter about Royal. Who's to say she didn't do something similar to my father when he made choices she disagreed with? But she was just an assistant back then. She wouldn't have had the same access. She had enough. She made his coffee. She organized his supplements. She controlled his schedule." Connor pushed his plate away, appetite gone. "I keep thinking about the last thing he said to me. Sorry about the park, kiddo. Next weekend for sure." But there was no next weekend, and I spent 22 years thinking that was just how life worked. You prioritize work until you run out of time. Victoria reached across the table, covering his hand with hers. "What did Detective Morrison say when you told him?" "That they're looking into it. But it's been over 2 decades. Evidence degrades. Medical records from that era aren't as detailed. Unless they find something concrete, it'll stay speculation. Does knowing for certain change anything? Connor thought about it, really thought. No, he finally admitted. Whether Sable killed my father or not, the lesson's the same. I refuse to be the kind of father who promises next weekend and never delivers. I refuse to let work consume me until there's nothing left for the people who matter. You're already not that father, Victoria said softly. You're here, every day, showing up, thanks to you demanding I earn it, thanks to you choosing to try. They finished breakfast in comfortable silence, the morning sun painting patterns on the worn hardwood floor. Royal woke fully, demanding attention with increasingly insistent sounds, and Connor lifted her from the carrier with practiced ease. "Hey, beautiful girl," he murmured, supporting her head carefully as he cradled her against his chest. "Did you sleep well? Dream about anything interesting?" Royal's dark blue eyes, still the unfocused gaze of infancy but already showing flecks of brown like his own, tracked his face with surprising intensity. "She knows your voice now," Victoria observed, gathering plates to wash. "Watch how she turns toward you when you speak." Connor tested it, moving slightly to the side while speaking softly. Royal's head turned, following the sound, and his heart performed some complicated acrobatic maneuver in his chest. "That's incredible," he breathed. "She actually recognizes me." "Of course she does. You're her father. You've been here since the moment you knew about her, the moment you knew." The words carried weight, acknowledgement of those first 13 days he'd missed, the days when Victoria had been alone, terrified, raising their daughter without him, because telling him the truth would have endangered them both. "I'll never stop being sorry about those first days," Connor said quietly. "I know, but Connor, you can't change the past. You can only keep showing up for the future." A knock at the door interrupted the moment. Victoria glanced at the clock, 8:47 a.m., earlier than expected visitors usually arrived. Connor handed Royal back to Victoria and moved to the door, peering through the peephole. A delivery person stood in the hallway, holding a large envelope marked with the county courthouse seal. He accepted it, signed the electronic pad, and closed the door before opening the envelope. Inside were official trial subpoenas for both him and Victoria, along with a thick packet of preparation materials from Catherine Wells. "It's real now," Victoria said, reading over his shoulder. 3 weeks from today, I'll be testifying about watching Sable poison you. You don't have to do this alone. Whatever you need, preparation, support, someone to hold Royal during testimony, I'm here. I know." She leaned her head briefly against his shoulder, a gesture that had become more natural over the past weeks. "I'm just scared of what they'll ask, of what Sable's lawyers will try to make me look like. They'll try to paint you as opportunistic, as someone who conveniently discovered poisoning and conveniently got pregnant and conveniently had evidence perfectly timed." Connor's voice hardened. "But the truth is on our side. The toxicology reports, the intercepted mail, the email filters, all of that is documented. Facts don't always win in court. Then we make sure they do." The rest of the morning passed in their established rhythm. Royal's feeding and diaper change, laundry folded while she napped, Connor working remotely from the small desk Victoria had cleared for him in the corner of the living room. He'd restructured his entire professional life around Harbor's Rest, taking only essential meetings in Manhattan and handling everything else via video conference. His board had been resistant. Several members argued he was abandoning his responsibilities, but Connor had been firm. This was the new model, and they could adapt or find a new CEO. Surprisingly, it was working. Decision-making was faster without bottlenecking through him. Division heads were stepping up, taking ownership of their departments. The company wasn't collapsing without his constant presence. It was evolving. Around noon, Connor's phone rang. Bradford Hunt, the CFO, who'd been with Drake Industries since before Connor's father died. Connor, we need to talk about the Whitmore account. What about it? Thompson is making aggressive moves. He's contacted our 3 largest shareholders with what amounts to a hostile takeover proposition, premium price positioned as rescuing Drake Industries from a CEO who's become distracted by personal issues. Connor's hand tightened on the phone. Lawrence Thompson had been circling Drake Industries for years, waiting for any sign of weakness. The trial, Connor's relocation to Harbor's Rest, his restructured schedule, Thompson was positioning it as abandonment. What's the timeline? Shareholder vote in 8 weeks. If he gets 51% support, he can force a sale. 8 weeks. The trial would consume at least 2 of those weeks. That left 6 weeks to convince shareholders that Connor's new model was strength, not weakness. I'll handle it, Connor said, keeping his voice steady despite the ice in his veins. The board wants you back in Manhattan, full-time presence until this is resolved. Connor looked across the room at Victoria, who was changing Royal's diaper while singing softly. At the time, they'd built this modest apartment over 6 careful weeks. At the family that depended on him showing up, not just sending money. No, he said firmly. I'll increase my Manhattan presence to 3 days a week. But I'm not abandoning my family to fight a corporate battle. That's exactly the narrative we need to reject. Connor, Bradford, listen to me. Thompson is betting that shareholders will see work-life balance as weakness. We're going to prove its strength. Companies built on CEO burnout are unsustainable. I'm building something better, and I need you to trust me on this. Silence on the line. Then you're gambling the entire company on an untested philosophy. I'm betting the company on the same principles that saved my life, that control isn't strength, that isolation isn't safety, and that sustainable success requires trust and balance. Connor paused. I need to know if you're with me on this. Another pause. I'm with you, but Connor, if this doesn't work, then I'll have tried something worth trying. That's better than winning by becoming someone I don't want to be. After hanging up, Connor sat for a long moment, processing the implications. 8 weeks to save his company while preparing for a trial that would expose the attempted murder of that company's CEO. 8 weeks to prove that being a present father made him a better leader, not a weaker one. What's wrong? Victoria asked, appearing beside him with Royal in her arms. He explained the situation, the hostile takeover attempt, the timeline, the board's demands. With each word, he watched her expression shift from concern to something more complicated. You have to fight this, she said finally. I know, but I'm not going back to the old model. I'm not abandoning you and Royal to... Connor, she cut him off gently but firmly. You can fight for the company and be here for us. They're not mutually exclusive. You just have to be strategic about it. The board wants a full-time Manhattan presence. The board wants to see commitment. Showing them commitment looks different than it used to. She shifted Royal to one arm, using her free hand to pull up her laptop. Let's map this out. What does Thompson actually need to win? For the next 2 hours, they strategized together, Victoria asking sharp questions that helped Connor clarify his thinking, identifying the key shareholders who'd be persuaded by data rather than fear, mapping out a communication plan that emphasized sustainable leadership rather than heroic CEO mythology. You're good at this, Connor observed as Victoria sketched out a timeline on paper. I built a coastal restoration proposal from nothing and got it funded against major competition. Strategic thinking isn't just for corporate boardrooms. Will you help me with this? Not as my employee or my assistant, but as my partner. I'll pay you consulting. No, her voice was firm. I'll help you because we're partners and your company surviving means our family has security. But I won't take payment for supporting my partner. That's not how this works. I'm still learning the rules. Rule 1. Partnership means mutual support without transaction. Rule 2. I tell you when you're being an idiot. Rule 3, you actually listen. I can work with that. By the time Royal woke for her afternoon feeding, they had a plan. Connor would go to Manhattan Wednesday through Friday each week, leaving Tuesday night and returning Saturday morning. 4 days away, 3 days home. Enough presents to reassure the board, enough time with Royal and Victoria to maintain the life they were building. I hate that we have to do this, Connor said, watching Victoria nurse Royal in the rocking chair they'd bought together 3 weeks ago. I hate it too. But Connor, this is temporary. 8 weeks. We can survive 8 weeks. What if it becomes 12 weeks? What if I get pulled back into old patterns? She looked up at him with those green eyes that had stopped him cold 6 weeks ago. Then I'll tell you, that's what I'm here for, to hold you accountable when you slip. You promise? I promise. But I also promise to trust that you'll catch yourself before I have to say anything. You've proven you can do this. That evening they video-called Tamsin Ortega, who'd become not just Royal's pediatrician but a trusted advisor on new parent survival. So you're asking if Royal will be traumatized by her father being gone 4 days a week? Tamsin asked with characteristic directness. Essentially, yes, Connor admitted. At 6 weeks old, no. Babies this young don't have object permanence yet. She won't consciously miss you. But she will benefit from consistency when you are here. Same routine, same attention quality, same presence. What about as she gets older? Then you adjust. The beauty of infancy is that you have time to establish patterns before consciousness kicks in fully. Use these 8 weeks to prove your model works, then reevaluate as Royal develops. That's surprisingly reassuring, Victoria said. Good parenting isn't about perfection. It's about being good enough, consistently. Connor's not abandoning his family. He's fighting to protect their financial security while maintaining presence. That's actually healthy modeling. After Tamsin hung up, Connor felt some of the tension release from his shoulders. I can do this, he said, more to himself than Victoria. We can do this, she corrected. Together. That night, after Royal was asleep in her bassinet, Connor and Victoria sat on the small balcony overlooking Harbour's Rest. The town was quiet, lights flickering in windows, the distant sound of someone's television drifting through open windows. Victoria? Thank you. For not making this a choice between company and family, for helping me figure out how to do both. That's what partnership means. He reached for her hand, lacing their fingers together. The physical contact had become easier, more natural over the past weeks, small touches that grounded them both. I'm scared, he admitted quietly, of failing at the company, of failing you and Royal, of proving everyone right who said I couldn't balance both worlds. Then let's make a deal. Every night we're apart, we video call before Royal's bedtime. You read her a story, even if it's through a screen. That keeps you present, even when you're physically distant. And if I start slipping back into old patterns, then I use our safe word. We have a safe word? Victoria smiled in the darkness. We do now. How about Saturday? Because Saturday is when you come home. And if I have to say Saturday during the week, it means you're not honoring the commitment to actually come home. Saturday, Connor repeated, testing it. Okay, if you say Saturday, I stop whatever I'm doing and we talk about what's not working. Deal. They sat in silence for a while longer, hands linked, both processing what the next 8 weeks would bring. The trial, the corporate battle, the test of whether their carefully built partnership could sustain under pressure. Connor? Yeah? We're going to be okay. Whatever happens with the trial or the company, we're going to be okay. He wanted to believe her. More than that, he needed to believe her. Say it again. We're going to be okay. Once more. She turned to look at him, and even in the dim light from inside, he could see the certainty in her expression. We are going to be okay, because we choose each other, every day. And that choice matters more than any verdict or shareholder vote. Connor pulled her close, breathing in her scent, soap and baby powder, and something uniquely Victoria. I love this, he said quietly, the ordinary parts, sitting on balconies making plans, figuring out problems together. I never knew I wanted this until I had it. It's not glamorous, it's everything. They stayed outside until the temperature dropped and Victoria shivered. Connor guided her back inside, checked on Royal, sleeping peacefully, tiny fists curled near her face, and found himself overwhelmed by the simple perfection of it. This was worth fighting for. The company mattered because it provided security for this. The trial mattered because it protected this. But this, Victoria and Royal and the life they were building in this modest apartment, this was the point of everything else. If you're invested in Connor and Victoria's journey through these impossible challenges, please hit that subscribe button for Mr. Steele Rich Stories. We bring you moral-rich narratives about real people facing real tests, choosing integrity over easy answers, and building love through consistent action. Share this story with someone who needs to see that being a present parent and a successful professional aren't mutually exclusive. Hit that like button and drop a comment about what you do in Connor's situation. Now let's see how they prepare for the trial that could change everything. Tuesday afternoon brought Catherine Wells to Harbour's Rest, a decision that surprised both Connor and Victoria. Most attorneys would have insisted they come to her office in Manhattan. Instead, she arrived at Victoria's apartment with a leather briefcase and an understanding that seemed born of experience rather than theoretical legal knowledge. I have 3 children, Catherine explained as she settled on Victoria's couch, accepting the offered coffee. I know what it's like trying to manage professional obligations with an infant, so we do this on your turf, on your schedule, with Royal present. She's part of this story anyway. Victoria relaxed slightly, tension she hadn't realized she was carrying releasing from her shoulders. Catherine pulled out a thick folder. Let's start with the basics. Victoria, you witnessed Sable Minton adding something to Connor's coffee on the morning of June 3rd. Walk me through that morning, minute by minute, every detail you remember. For the next 2 hours, Catherine methodically deconstructed Victoria's testimony, asking the same questions from different angles, probing for inconsistencies, playing devil's advocate with the aggressive efficiency that Sable's defense team would employ. Why didn't you confront Sable immediately? I was nobody, a woman he'd been dating for 12 weeks. She was his most trusted advisor. But you suspected poisoning. That's attempted murder. Why not call the police? And tell them what? That I saw someone add something to coffee? They'd have said it could be vitamins, supplements, anything. I needed proof. So you collected samples. How many? 4, over the course of 2 weeks, and you sent them to a private lab, independently operated, no connection to Drake Industries or anyone who might have loyalty to Connor or Sable. Catherine nodded, making notes. Good. The defense will try to suggest you contaminated those samples yourself, creating evidence to support a false narrative. We need to establish the lab's independence clearly. I kept receipts, emails, chain of custody documentation. Excellent. Let's talk about pregnancy. When did you discover what you were expecting? June 22nd. 3 weeks after I witnessed the poisoning. And you didn't tell Connor immediately because I'd already sent him a certified letter explaining everything. The poisoning, the samples, my concerns. When he didn't respond, when I couldn't reach him by phone, I realized Sable was intercepting communications. If she knew I was pregnant, I'd become an even bigger threat. So you disappeared. I protected my daughter. Catherine's expression softened slightly. That's the framing we'll use. Not disappeared, protected. Maternal instinct, not manipulation. The defense will try to paint you as calculating. We paint you as a mother doing what mothers do, protecting their children from danger. They took a break when Royal woke, demanding feeding and attention. Catherine used the time to review her notes, occasionally asking clarifying questions while Victoria nursed. "You're very calm about all this," Victoria observed. "I've been prosecuting white-collar crime for 15 years. I've seen every manipulation tactic, every corporate cover-up, every attempt to use power and money to escape consequences. What Sable Minton did, systematic poisoning, isolation, control, it's not unique. What is unique is that Connor Drake actually listened to you, believed you, and helped build a case instead of circling the wagons. He didn't listen at first. He stormed into my apartment ready to destroy me. But then he saw Royal, and everything changed. That's the narrative we're building. Not a perfect story, but a real one. Connor's transformation from someone who trusted the wrong person to someone who learned to question, to verify, to protect what actually matters. Will it be enough? Against evidence this strong? Yes. Against Sable's legal team trying to introduce doubt? We'll see. Connor's turn came next, and Catherine was equally thorough, dissecting his relationship with Sable, the symptoms he'd experienced, the control she'd exerted over his life without him recognizing it. "The defense will argue you're a successful billionaire who couldn't possibly be manipulated," Catherine said. "How do you respond?" "I respond by saying that intelligence and success don't make you immune to manipulation, especially from someone you've trusted since childhood. Sable exploited my grief over my father's death, my fear of failing his legacy, my isolation after he died. She positioned herself as the only person who truly understood what I needed. And Victoria threatened that dynamic. Victoria was the first person in years who saw me as something other than Drake Industries' CEO. She challenged me. She demanded I be better than my worst instincts. Sable couldn't control that relationship, so she tried to destroy it." Catherine made extensive notes. "Good. That's compelling. Now let's talk about your father." Connor's jaw tightened. "What about him?" "Detective Morrison told me about your suspicions, the similar symptoms, the timeline of Sable's employment, but Connor, we can't introduce that at trial. It's speculative, prejudicial, and there's no physical evidence. But if she did it before, then it shows a pattern, yes. But without proof, mentioning it will backfire. The judge will exclude it, and the jury will wonder what else we're making up." Catherine's voice gentled slightly. "I know that's not what you want to hear. It's not about what I want. It's about justice. Justice for the attempted murder of Connor Drake, we can prove. Justice for possible involvement in your father's death, we cannot. Not yet. Maybe not ever. You have to make peace with that." Connor looked at Victoria, who'd been listening quietly while rocking Royal. She gave him a small nod, acknowledgement that this was hard, but necessary. "Fine," he said finally. "We don't mention my father. Thank you. Now, let's talk about the intercepted letter." The preparation session lasted until early evening. By the time Catherine packed up her briefcase, both Connor and Victoria were exhausted, wrung out from reliving trauma and preparing to relive it again in a public courtroom. "You're both going to do fine," Catherine said at the door. "The evidence is solid. Your testimony is credible. Sable Minton is going to face consequences for what she did." After she left, Connor and Victoria collapsed on the couch together, Royal between them in her bouncer, neither having energy for more than existing in shared space. "That was brutal," Victoria said finally, "and we have to do it again, in front of a jury, with Sable watching. Are you scared, terrified? You?" "More than I want to admit." Connor reached for her hand, and they sat in silence while Royal made small baby sounds, oblivious to the legal battle being waged around her existence. "Connor?" "Yeah?" Promise me something. Anything. Promise that no matter what happens at trial, guilty verdict, not guilty, mistrial, whatever, you won't let it change what we're building here. This," she gestured to the apartment, to Royal, to their intertwined hands. "Promise this stays sacred. I promise. The trial is about accountability. This is about us. They're separate. Are they, though? If Sable walks free, then she walks free, and we deal with that reality. But we're not letting her have this too. She already took months of my life, 13 days with Royal, your peace of mind during pregnancy. She doesn't get to take our future." Victoria leaned her head on his shoulder, and Connor wrapped his arm around her, holding her close while Royal dozed between them. "I'm glad you're here," Victoria whispered. "There's nowhere else I'd rather be." The next morning brought Connor's departure from Manhattan, the first of many goodbyes they'd face over the next 8 weeks. He'd packed a small bag, enough for 3 days, and stood in the doorway of Victoria's apartment looking reluctant to leave. "It's only until Saturday," Victoria reminded him, though her voice wavered slightly. 4 days, 96 hours, 5,760 minutes. You did the math? "I've been doing the math since Bradford called." Connor crossed back to where Victoria stood, holding Royal. He kissed Royal's forehead gently. "Be good for your mama, okay? Daddy will call every night to read you a story. She's 6 weeks old. She doesn't understand stories. She understands my voice. That's enough." He kissed Victoria then, soft and lingering, a promise rather than a goodbye. They'd been careful about physical affection, maintaining boundaries while they figured out what they were to each other. But this felt necessary, natural, a small claiming of what was growing between them. "Stay safe," Victoria said when they broke apart. "Always. Call me for anything, middle of the night, early morning, whenever. I'm always available for you and Royal. I know." He forced himself to walk away, to get in his car, to drive toward Manhattan and the corporate battle that would determine Drake Industries' future. But as Harbor's Rest disappeared in his rearview mirror, Connor felt the distance like a physical ache. The temporary Manhattan apartment was exactly as sterile as he'd feared. Modern furniture with no personality, views of other buildings instead of the small-town charm of Harbor's Rest, silence instead of Royal's small sounds and Victoria's presence. "I'm here," he said when she answered. "And I hate it. It's only temporary. This place has no soul. There's nothing here that feels like life. Then make it feel like life. Put up photos, play music, make it a space you inhabit, not just somewhere you sleep between meetings. Will you help me pick out photos?" They spent the next hour on video call, Victoria holding Royal while Connor connected his laptop, and they scrolled through pictures together. Royal's first days, the park opening, Myrtle holding Royal while making sarcastic comments, Connor and Victoria at the diner sharing breakfast. "That one," Victoria said, pointing to a candid shot Juniper had taken at the bookstore. Connor was reading to Royal from a children's book while Victoria watched, expression soft, with something neither had been ready to name yet. "That one," Connor agreed. He ordered prints from his phone, overnight delivery, and by the time they hung up, the apartment felt slightly less oppressive. The next morning brought Connor's first shareholder meeting, and he arrived prepared with data, projections, and a narrative that reframed his Harbor's Rest presence as strategic evolution rather than personal distraction. "Gentlemen, ladies," he began, facing the skeptical expressions around the conference table. "Lawrence Thompson wants you to believe that my restructured schedule represents weakened commitment. But consider this. Drake Industries has operated for 2 decades on what amounts to a single point of failure. Me. Every major decision bottlenecked through my personal approval. What happens if I have a heart attack like my father? What happens if I'm incapacitated? The company collapses. He pulled up a presentation slide showing organizational structure before and after his restructuring. Over the past 6 weeks, I've implemented distributed leadership. Division heads now have real decision-making authority. We've established clear protocols for crisis management that don't require CEO intervention. And the results speak for themselves. More slides, decision-making speed up 43%, employee satisfaction up 27%, client relationship stability improved across all metrics. Thompson is selling fear, Connor continued. I'm selling sustainability, and I'm proving my model works by being more strategically present while being less operationally involved. Better outcomes, not more hours. The room was quiet. Then Thomas Whitfield, one of the more traditional board members, leaned forward. You're betting the entire company on an untested management philosophy. I'm betting the company on the same principles that saved my life. That control isn't strength, that isolation isn't safety, and that sustainable success requires trust, delegation, and balance. If our shareholders don't believe that, maybe Drake Industries isn't the right company for them. That's a hell of a gamble. It's the only move that's honest. The meeting ran another 2 hours, with Connor fielding questions about everything from quarterly projections to his personal schedule to how he planned to maintain shareholder confidence during the upcoming trial. The trial will be public, he said bluntly. It will be uncomfortable. The prosecution will present evidence that someone I trusted attempted to murder me. But gentlemen, ladies, that's not weakness, that's accountability. I'm facing the truth rather than burying it, and I'm doing it while still running this company effectively. That's exactly the kind of leadership you should want. By the time the meeting ended, Connor had commitments from 3 key shareholders and tentative support from 2 others. Not enough to guarantee victory against Thompson's takeover attempt, but enough to show momentum. He called Victoria immediately after. How'd it go? She asked, and he could hear Royal fussing in the background. Better than expected. Not perfect, but better. That's all we can ask for. How's my girl? Your girl is currently demonstrating her opinions about tummy time very vocally. Connor smiled, the sound of Royal's protest somehow comforting despite the distance. Put me on video. I want to see her. Victoria switched to video call, propping her phone against something so he could see both of them. Royal was indeed on her tummy time mat, face scrunched in displeasure, while Victoria knelt beside her offering encouragement. Come on, beautiful girl, Connor said, his voice transmitting through the phone speaker. You've got this. Strong neck muscles. Show Daddy how strong you are. Royal's head turned slightly toward the sound, and Connor felt his chest tighten with love and longing. She heard you, Victoria said softly. She knows it's you. They stayed on video call for the next 30 minutes, Connor watching through a screen while Royal eventually accepted tummy time, then needed changing, then demanded feeding. Watching through a screen felt like torture, close enough to see but too far to help, to hold, to be present in any way that mattered. Only 3 more days until Saturday, Victoria reminded him, when Royal was finally settled. 3 days too many. Connor, this was your first day. You can't fall apart on day 1. I'm not falling apart, I'm just missing you both more than I thought possible. We miss you too, but we're okay. Myrtle came by with a casserole. Tamsin's checking in tomorrow. We have support. I know, doesn't make being away easier. It's not supposed to be easy. It's supposed to be worth it. That became their evening routine. Video call before Royal's bedtime, Connor reading stories through the screen, even though she couldn't understand words yet, watching Victoria move through their small apartment with their daughter, feeling simultaneously connected and impossibly distant. Thursday brought another shareholder meeting, this one more contentious. Thompson had clearly been working behind the scenes, and two shareholders Connor had counted on wavered when confronted with projections suggesting Drake Industries would be worth more under traditional leadership. "Traditional leadership nearly killed me," Connor said bluntly when challenged. "Is that what you're advocating for?" "We're advocating for undivided attention," a shareholder named Patricia Sterling responded. "For a CEO whose personal life doesn't dominate business headlines. My personal life dominated headlines because someone attempted to murder me. That's not distraction, that's attempted homicide. And the fact that I'm standing here, running this company, preparing to testify at trial, and still maintaining operational excellence should tell you everything about my capacity to handle pressure. Or it tells us you're stretched too thin." Connor pulled up his phone, opened his calendar, and projected it on the conference room screen. "Here's my schedule for the past 6 weeks. 11 hours weekly on strategic planning, 8 hours on shareholder relations, 12 hours on high-level operations oversight, 6 hours on board communications. That's 37 hours, more than many CEOs dedicate to the role. The difference is, I do it in 3 days instead of spreading it across 7, and I do it without the performative, always available theater that masks inefficiency." He showed another slide, time-tracking data from his division heads before and after restructuring. "My presence isn't required for excellence. My leadership is. And I'm providing that more effectively now than I did when I was trying to control every detail." The meeting ended without clear resolution, but Connor left feeling like he'd held ground rather than lost it. Friday afternoon, Bradford requested a private meeting at a coffee shop 3 blocks from Drake Industries headquarters. "I need to be honest with you," Bradford said, once they were seated with overpriced lattes. "Thompson's got traction. He's up to 48% shareholder support. If he gets to 51%, the vote passes, and you're out." Connor's stomach dropped. "That's 3%. Who's undecided?" Dallasay Corporation, Henderson Holdings, and the Riverside Trust. Combined, they control 6%. Win any one of them, you're safe. And they want personal meetings, FaceTime, reassurance that you're committed long-term, not just until the novelty of fatherhood wears off. Connor thought about Victoria's words. "You can be there for the company and be here for us." 3 meetings. He could do 3 meetings. Set them up. "But Bradford, I need you to understand something. If they demand I abandon my family, abandon Harbor's Rest, abandon the life I've built, I won't do it. I'll walk away from Drake Industries before I become the person I was a year ago." Bradford studied him for a long moment. "You really mean that?" "I really mean that." "Then we'll make sure it doesn't come to that. Because Connor, I've watched you lead for 15 years, and you're better now than you've ever been. More focused, more strategic, less reactive. Whatever's happening in Harbor's Rest, it's working. We just need to convince the shareholders of that." They spent the rest of the meeting strategizing, positioning distributed leadership as innovation rather than delegation, framing Connor's Harbor's Rest presence as strategic market expansion into sustainable business models, building a narrative that made balance look like competitive advantage. By the time Connor left for the drive back to Harbor's Rest, it was after 8 p.m. He planned to leave by 6, but the meeting ran long, and traffic was worse than expected. He texted Victoria, running late. "Won't be home until midnight. I'm sorry." Her response came immediately, Saturday, just one word, their safe word, the signal that he was breaking his promise to be home by Saturday morning. Connor pulled over immediately and called her. "Connor, stop. I'm not mad. I'm using our safe word because we agreed that's what I'd do when things aren't working. Being home at midnight instead of 9 a.m. doesn't count as Saturday morning. But it's only 3 hours. It's the principle. We said Saturday morning. You're negotiating for midnight Friday. Next week it'll be, I'll be home by 2 a.m. and then I'll catch an early morning train, and before you know it, Saturday mornings disappear. Connor sat in his car, engine idling, traffic passing by, and recognized she was right. This was exactly how boundaries eroded, one small compromise leading to another until the original commitment was unrecognizable. You're right. I'm leaving now. I'll be home by midnight, and that's not good enough. Bradford's rescheduling tomorrow's meeting for Monday. I'll be home by 9 a.m. tomorrow, as promised. Connor, you don't have to. Yes, I do. Because you're holding me accountable, which means you're trusting me to actually change when I'm slipping. That matters more than any shareholder meeting. Okay, thank you. For saying Saturday. For not letting me rationalize my way into broken promises. That's what partners do. He made it home by 11:40, and Victoria was waiting up despite the late hour, royal asleep in her bassinet beside the couch. You came home, she said simply. I promised I would. A lot of people break promises when work demands it. I'm not a lot of people. I'm Royal's father, your partner, and my word has to mean something, or none of this works. Victoria crossed to him, wrapping her arms around his waist and resting her head against his chest. Connor held her close, breathing in her scent, feeling the rightness of being here rather than in that sterile Manhattan apartment. I missed you, he murmured into her hair. I missed you too. It's been a long 3 days, only 5 more weeks of this. We can do 5 more weeks. Can we? She pulled back to look at him, and in her green eyes he saw certainty. Yes, because we're choosing this, together, and that makes it survivable. They stayed up another hour despite exhaustion, talking about everything and nothing. Royal's developmental milestones that week, the trial preparation materials that had arrived, Myrtle's increasingly colourful commentary about young people and their emotional constipation. When they finally went to bed, Connor lay beside Victoria in the darkness, listening to Royal's soft breathing from her bassinet, and felt the week's tension finally release. Connor? Victoria's voice was quiet, nearly asleep. Yeah, I'm proud of you, for coming home when it would have been easier to stay, for keeping your word, for being who you said you'd be. I'm trying, I know. That's why I'm proud. He reached for her hand under the covers, lacing their fingers together. This is the hardest thing I've ever done, building a family or saving the company. Both. Either. Everything and it's worth it. Every difficult moment, every sacrifice, every time I choose this over easier options. It's worth it. Good. Because we're just getting started. Connor smiled in the darkness, squeezed her hand, and let himself believe that somehow, impossibly, they were going to make this work. Are you rooting for Connor and Victoria as hard as we are? Hit that like button if you believe that keeping promises matters more than convenient excuses. Subscribe to Mr. Steele Rich Stories for more narratives about people choosing integrity over ease, and share this story with someone who needs to see that being present for family and being successful at work aren't mutually exclusive. They just require different thinking. Drop a comment about what you do in Connor's position, and let's see how they face the trial that could change everything. The courthouse steps were exactly as awful as Victoria had imagined, a gauntlet of reporters, cameras, and shouted questions that security tried unsuccessfully to block. Miss Rhodes, did you knowingly enter a relationship with Connor Drake for financial gain? Mr. Drake, how do you respond to allegations that this entire trial is a publicity stunt? Is the baby even yours, Mr. Drake? Connor's hand found the small of Victoria's back, steady and grounding. Eyes forward. Don't engage, just keep walking. They made it through the doors into the relative calm of the courthouse interior, where Detective Morrison waited with Catherine Wells and a younger woman Catherine introduced as her co-counsel, Jennifer Park. Ready? Catherine asked. not unkindly. "No," Victoria answered honestly. "But I'm here anyway." The courtroom was smaller than movies made them appear, but no less intimidating. Sable Minton sat at the defense table in a conservative navy suit, her expression carefully neutral. When Connor entered, her eyes tracked him with an intensity that made Victoria's skin crawl, not hatred exactly, but something more unsettling. Possessiveness. As if even now, even facing attempted murder charges, Sable still believed she had some claim to Connor's life. The defense attorney was a woman named Diane Northwood, late 50s, silver hair styled to project authority without aggression, known for defending white-collar criminals with surgical precision. Judge Howard Stevens entered, a stern-looking man in his 60s with a reputation for running efficient courtrooms and tolerating no theatrics. He reviewed preliminary matters quickly, then addressed the jury. "Ladies and gentlemen, you're about to hear a case involving alleged attempted murder, conspiracy, fraud, and obstruction. The charges are serious. The evidence will be complex. Your job is to evaluate facts, not speculation, not emotion. Facts." Catherine Wells rose for opening statements, and Victoria watched her transform from the warm, understanding woman who'd prepared them at Victoria's apartment into a prosecutorial force. "Members of the jury, this is a case about control, about what happens when someone decides they know better than everyone else how a person's life should be lived. Sable Minton didn't just work for Connor Drake, she controlled him, his communications, his relationships, his health. And when Connor Drake began making choices she disapproved of, when he started a relationship with Victoria Rhodes that threatened Sable's control, she made a decision. She would eliminate the threat. Catherine walked the jury through the timeline, Connor's symptoms beginning 9 months before he met Victoria, escalating over time, perfectly correlated with his morning coffee that Sable prepared. Victoria's arrival in Connor's life, the growing relationship, Sable's increasing interference. On June 3rd, Victoria Rhodes witnessed something that would change everything. She saw Sable Minton add liquid from a small vial to Connor Drake's coffee. 3 drops, stirred, replaced exactly where Connor would find it. Victoria didn't know what was in that vial, but she knew something was wrong. Catherine described Victoria's investigation. The samples collected, the lab results showing arsenic, the certified letter that never reached Connor because Sable signed for it and returned it. Victoria Rhodes discovered she was pregnant. And suddenly, this wasn't just about protecting herself, it was about protecting an innocent child from someone who'd proven willing to poison another human being. So she disappeared. She hid. She gave birth alone because telling the truth meant putting her daughter in danger. The opening statement lasted 20 minutes, methodically building a narrative of systematic poisoning, deliberate isolation, and attempted murder motivated by a pathological need for control. Diane Northwood's opening was equally compelling, but from a completely different angle. "Ladies and gentlemen, Victoria Rhodes is a talented storyteller. She has to be. Her career depends on securing funding for projects that compete against hundreds of others. And the story she's told you through MS Wells is certainly dramatic. But let's talk about facts instead of narrative." Diane walked to a chart showing Victoria's financial situation. Struggling environmental consultant, project that needed $500,000 in funding. Meets billionaire at fundraiser, meeting she secured through what she's called strategic networking. Begins relationship with said billionaire. Receives substantial grant for her project, then suddenly discovers poisoning. Get pregnant, disappears. Returns with baby and convenient accusations against the one person who might oppose her access to Connor Drake's resources. Victoria felt Connor's hand find hers under the table, squeezing reassurance. The prosecution wants you to believe Sable Minton, a woman who devoted 22 years to supporting Connor Drake, who helped him through his father's death, who guided him through building a billion-dollar company, suddenly decided to kill him. Why? Because he started dating someone? That's not the motive. That's jealous villain territory. Real life doesn't work that way. Diane acknowledged that Connor had experienced health symptoms, but symptoms aren't evidence of poisoning. They're evidence of stress, overwork, and the toll of running a major corporation. Miss Minton did add supplements to Mr. Drake's coffee, vitamins, magnesium, and adaptogens recommended by naturopathic physicians. She did this with his knowledge and consent, trying to support his health during a difficult time. She positioned Victoria as a manipulator who exploited Connor's brief distraction with their relationship to create a narrative that eliminated Sable, the one person who might question Victoria's motives. At the end of this trial, you'll be asked to determine guilt beyond reasonable doubt. I ask that you remember, doubt isn't failure. Doubt is wisdom. Doubt is recognizing that a compelling story isn't the same as proven fact. The opening statement set the battle lines clearly. This wouldn't be about whether arsenic appeared in Connor's coffee. The toxicology was undisputed. It would be about who put it there and why. The prosecution's first witness was Dr. Benjamin Torres, the toxicologist who'd analyzed Victoria's samples. Catherine walked him through his credentials: PhD in toxicology, 20 years analyzing substances for criminal investigations, expert witness in 43 cases. Dr. Torres, what did you find when analyzing the samples provided by Victoria Rhodes? Arsenic trioxide. Specifically, a concentration of approximately 0.3 milligrams per liter in the coffee samples. Additionally, I found traces in what was labeled as a supplement vial provided by Detective Morrison during the investigation. Is 0.3 milligrams per liter significant? Very. A single dose at that concentration wouldn't cause immediate acute poisoning, but daily consumption over weeks or months would result in chronic arsenic poisoning, exactly the symptoms Mr. Drake experienced. Headaches, fatigue, gastrointestinal distress, neurological effects. Could this arsenic have appeared through contamination, industrial processes? The concentration and type of arsenic trioxide found suggests deliberate addition, not environmental contamination. The chemical signature doesn't match any known industrial contamination pattern. Catherine introduced the lab reports into evidence, then yielded to cross-examination. Diane Northwood approached with a friendly smile. Dr. Torres, you said these samples were provided by Victoria Rhodes, correct? Correct. And you analyzed them when? June 17th through June 24th, 2 to 3 weeks after they were allegedly collected. Correct? Correct. In those 2 to 3 weeks, these samples were in Victoria Rhodes's possession, in her apartment, subject to whatever handling, storage, or potential contamination she chose. Correct? I can only speak to what I received and analyzed. Chain of custody before that is unknown. You can't verify that Victoria Rhodes didn't add arsenic to clean coffee samples, can you? I have no reason to believe. I didn't ask what you believe. I asked what you can verify. Can you verify the contents of those samples from the moment they left Connor Drake's mug until they arrived at your lab? No, I cannot personally verify that. Thank you. No further questions. The implication hung in the air. Victoria could have created the evidence herself. Detective Morrison testified next, walking through the investigation timeline. Victoria's initial contact with police, the intercepted letter with Sable's signature on the return receipt, the email and phone records showing systematic blocking of Victoria's attempts to contact Connor. When did you decide there was sufficient evidence to pursue charges? Catherine asked. When we combined Victoria's testimony and samples with the documented pattern of communication interference. Individually, Each piece might be explained away. Together, they showed deliberate systematic poisoning and isolation. Did you investigate Victoria Rhodes's background, her potential motives, thoroughly? We found no evidence of prior scams, fraud, or pattern of exploiting wealthy individuals. Her financial history showed consistent, modest income from legitimate environmental consulting. The pregnancy was verified by medical records. Everything checked out. Diane's cross-examination focused on what Detective Morrison couldn't verify. You never actually witnessed Sable Minton adding anything to Connor Drake's coffee, did you? No, but Victoria Rhodes. Yes or no, Detective? You personally never witnessed it. You never found arsenic in Sable Minton's possession at the time of arrest. The vial Victoria described was not found, correct? But, yes or no, not found. So your entire case rests on Victoria Rhodes's word, samples that she controlled for weeks, and circumstantial evidence about emails and phone calls that could have alternate explanations. When you consider the totality of evidence, I'm sure the jury will. Thank you, Detective. The first day ended with the jury looking thoughtful but not convinced. Catherine had built a foundation, but Diane had introduced enough doubt to make the outcome uncertain. Outside the courtroom, avoiding the press through a side exit, Connor and Victoria sat in his car without immediately starting the engine. That was hard, Victoria said quietly. You expected it to be easy? I expected the truth to be more obvious. Truth rarely is. That's why we need evidence, testimony, and time to build understanding. They drove back to Harbour's Rest in near silence, both processing what tomorrow would bring. Victoria's testimony, the moment when she'd have to face Sable and the jury and relive the morning that changed everything. At home, Royal was being watched by Tamsin, who'd volunteered to handle childcare during the trial. She took one look at both their faces and made an executive decision. I'm staying tonight. You both need sleep, and Royal's been perfect. Go to bed. I'll handle the overnight feeding. Tamsin, you don't have to. I know I don't have to. I want to. You're facing something hard and you need rest. Let someone help you. Victoria hugged her, throat tight with gratitude. Thank you. In bed that night, Connor held Victoria close, both of them awake despite exhaustion. Tomorrow I testify, Victoria whispered. Tomorrow you tell the truth. What if they don't believe me? Then they don't believe you, and we deal with that. But Victoria, you can't control what the jury thinks. You can only control whether you show up and tell your truth. I'm terrified. I know. So am I. Promise me something, anything. Promise that whatever happens tomorrow, we're okay. You and me and Royal. Promise that a verdict doesn't change what we're building. Connor tightened his arms around her. I promise. The trial is about justice. We're about something bigger than justice. We're about choosing each other every day. A jury can't change that. Okay. Okay. They lay in the darkness, listening to Royal's soft breathing from her bassinet, both drawing strength from the small life they'd created and the larger life they were building together. Tomorrow will be hard. But tonight they had this, each other, Royal, and the certainty that some things were worth facing any difficulty to protect. Victoria's hand shook as she placed it on the Bible, swearing to tell the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth. She sat in the witness box, acutely aware of every eye on her, Connor supportive but worried, Sable's calculating and cold, the jury's skeptical and curious, the press gallery's hunger for drama. Catherine Wells approached with a kind smile, the same warmth she'd shown during preparation. Miss Rhodes, can you tell the court how you met Connor Drake? Victoria took a breath, found Connor's eyes across the courtroom and began. I met Connor at a fundraiser for coastal resilience in March. I'd been invited because I'd submitted a reef restoration proposal that qualified for their grant program. Connor was there as a donor, and we started talking about my proposal, about biomimetic structures and sustainability metrics. What attracted you to Connor Drake? His intelligence. The way he actually read my proposal, instead of just glancing at the summary. He asked questions that showed real understanding of the engineering challenges. He listened when I talked about things that mattered to me, not his wealth. I knew he was wealthy. Everyone knows that. But wealth wasn't what made me interested in continuing the conversation. Catherine walked Victoria through the development of their relationship. 3 months of dinners, conversations, the decision to stay at Connor's penthouse for 2 weeks when her apartment needed fumigation. During those 2 weeks, what did you observe about Connor's morning routine? Connor always made his own coffee. Same time every morning, 6:45. Same mug, dark blue with the Drake Industries logo. He was very consistent about it. And Sable Minton? She arrived at Connor's penthouse every morning at 7:15. Like clockwork. She had her own key, her own access. She'd go straight to the kitchen, review Connor's schedule, and prepare materials for his day. Tell us about the morning of June 3rd. This was it, the moment everything had changed. Victoria's voice remained steady through sheer force of will. I woke up early that morning, around 6. Connor was still asleep. I went to the kitchen for water and saw Connor's coffee mug on the counter. He'd made it and left it there while he took a phone call. I was about to go back to bed when I heard Sable's key in the door. She arrived early, 45 minutes early. I don't know why. I heard her coming, and something made me hide. Instinct, maybe. I moved into the pantry where I could see the kitchen through the partially open door. What did you see? Sable went straight to Connor's mug. She pulled a small glass vial from her purse, maybe 2 inches tall, clear liquid inside. She opened it, added 3 drops to the coffee, stirred it with a spoon from the drawer, then washed the spoon and put it back. She replaced the mug exactly where Connor had left it, put the vial back in her purse, and left. What did you do? I waited until she was gone. Then I took a sample of that coffee. I poured about 2 ounces into a clean container I labeled and sealed. Then I added fresh coffee from Connor's pot to replace what I'd taken so he wouldn't notice anything missing. Why didn't you tell Connor immediately? Because I didn't know what I'd witnessed. It could have been vitamins, supplements, something innocent. But it felt wrong. The secrecy, the early arrival, the way she looked around to make sure no one was watching. So I decided to document first, accuse later. What happened over the next 2 weeks? I collected 3 more samples on different mornings when Sable added liquid from the same vial. I documented dates and times. I sent all 4 samples to an independent lab for analysis, paying with my own money, using a false name to maintain independence. And the lab results? Showed arsenic trioxide, enough to cause chronic poisoning over time, but not enough for immediate acute symptoms. Catherine introduced the lab reports into evidence, giving the jury time to review the technical details. What did you do when you received these results? I tried to tell Connor. I wrote a letter explaining everything, the samples, the lab results, what I'd witnessed. I explained that I believed Sable was poisoning him and why. I sent it certified mail to his office, marked personal and confidential. Why not tell him in person? Because by then, I'd noticed other things. The way Sable controlled Connor's calendar. The way my phone calls to him went to voicemail more often than not. The way emails I sent him seemed to disappear. I realized she was intercepting his communications, so I needed something with an official paper trail. Catherine introduced the returned envelope, the certified letter with Sable's signature on the return receipt, marked, refused, and sent back to Victoria. This is that letter? Yes. Refused by Sable's signature, never reaching Connor. That's when I knew I was right. She was actively preventing me from telling him the truth. You discovered you were pregnant around this time, June 22nd, 3 weeks after the last sample collection, What did you do? Victoria's voice wavered slightly for the first time. I realized that if Sable knew I was pregnant, I'd become an even bigger threat. So I disappeared. I withdrew my savings, left my apartment, moved to Harbour's Rest where I'd spent summers in foster care as a child. I hid because I didn't know what else to do. You gave birth alone? Yes, on a Tuesday morning in October, in a hospital where no one knew me, with no one there except medical staff. I named her Royal Roads and tried to figure out how to keep her safe. When did you finally tell Connor Drake about his daughter? When Detective Morrison contacted me and said they had enough evidence to protect us, that it was safe to come forward, 13 days after Royal was born. Catherine let that sink in. 13 days of Connor missing his daughter's first moments, because Victoria had been too terrified to tell him. Miss Rhodes, the defense will suggest you fabricated this entire story for financial gain. How do you respond? Victoria looked directly at the jury. I respond by saying I wish it were fabricated. I wish I'd made this up, because the alternative, that I had to hide my pregnancy, give birth alone, live in fear, raise my daughter's first 2 weeks without her father because telling the truth would have put us in danger, that's not convenient, that's not profitable, that's terrifying. And if I were making this up, I'd have written myself a much less traumatic story. No further questions. Diane Northwood rose slowly, adjusting her reading glasses with deliberate precision. Miss Rhodes, you expect this jury to believe that you, a woman who'd been dating one of the wealthiest men in New York for exactly 3 months, discovered a murder plot and said nothing for 2 weeks? I collected evidence before making accusations. That's not saying nothing. That's being careful. Being careful. Interesting choice of words. Let's talk about being careful. You researched Connor Drake before attending that fundraiser, didn't you? I researched all the major donors listed in the program. That's standard networking practice. Did you know he was recently single? I'd heard rumors. Harbour's Rest is small. People talk. So you knew a wealthy, recently single man would be attending an event where you'd be presenting a project that needed funding. Convenient timing. The fundraiser invitation had nothing to do with Connor's relationship status. I was invited because my work qualified. Of course. And the pregnancy, when exactly did you conceive? Victoria felt heat rise in her cheeks. I'm not certain of the exact date, but based on the birth date and typical gestation. Let me help you. Based on Royal's birth date of October 15th, conception would have been approximately mid-January. Does that sound right? Approximately, yes. Mid-January. 2 weeks after Connor Drake made his first major donation to your restoration project. Almost as if what? Victoria's voice rose despite her intention to stay calm. As if I deliberately got pregnant to trap a man I was already in a relationship with. That makes no sense, doesn't it? You discover poisoning, you collect samples, you get pregnant, you disappear with leverage, a baby you claim is his. Then you return at exactly the moment when his emotional state makes him most vulnerable. I returned when Detective Morrison said it was safe. When they had enough evidence to protect my daughter. Your daughter, not our daughter. Interesting. She's Connor's daughter. We've done paternity testing through an independent. Yes, testing was arranged after you'd already established a relationship with Mr. Drake. Testing he paid for. Testing processed by a laboratory that, while technically independent, certainly has financial incentive to provide results that please a billionaire client. The lab is nationally accredited with, I'm sure they're very reputable. Let's talk about something else. These samples you collected, where did you store them? In my apartment, in a sealed container in my refrigerator, for 2 to 3 weeks. Yes, I didn't alter anything. You can't prove that, can you? The chain of custody shows a gap of weeks where these samples were entirely in your control. I had no reason to contaminate. You had 500,000 reasons. That's what your restoration project was worth. And if Connor Drake believed someone was trying to kill him, someone who just happened to be the person standing between you and unlimited access to his resources, well, that certainly solves a problem, doesn't it? Catherine shot to her feet. Objection. Counsel is testifying, not questioning. Sustained, Judge Stevens said firmly. Ms. Northwood, ask questions or sit down. Of course, Your Honor. Diane turned back to Victoria. You said you lived in fear, yet you also said you moved to Harbour's Rest, a town you knew, where you had connections. That's not hiding, that's strategic relocation. I went somewhere I'd feel safe, somewhere you could establish residency, build relationships, create a support network that would vouch for your character when the time came to make accusations. I went somewhere where I could raise my daughter safely. The daughter you claim is Connor Drake's, but who you named Rhodes, not Drake. Why? Because I wanted her to have her own identity, not be defined by her father's wealth and legacy. Or because you weren't certain Connor would accept paternity. I was certain, but I wanted her to be valued for herself, not her last name. How noble. Tell me, Miss Rhodes, what's your current living situation? I live in my apartment in Harbour's Rest, alone, with Royal, and Connor stays there frequently. How frequently? 4 nights a week, typically. So Connor Drake, one of the wealthiest men in America, is living in your modest apartment 4 nights a week. Does he contribute to rent? He's offered. I've declined. Because you're so independent. Yet he pays for groceries, childcare, medical expenses, all of Royal's costs. He's her father. That's what fathers do. Or that's what men do. When they feel obligated to support a child, they're told is theirs by a woman who's demonstrated exceptional ability to collect evidence that supports her narrative. Victoria's hands clenched in her lap. Everything I've told you is the truth as you've constructed it. No further questions. Victoria stepped down from the witness stand feeling flayed open. Every choice she'd made had been twisted, reframed, made to look calculating instead of protective. Connor was there immediately as they left the courtroom through the side exit, his arm around her shoulders. You did beautifully, he said quietly. I sounded defensive, emotional, exactly what they wanted. You sounded human and honest. The jury will see that. But as they drove back to Harbour's Rest, Victoria wasn't certain. Diane had been effective, raising doubt without outright accusations, suggesting alternative interpretations that made Victoria look like a skilled manipulator rather than a frightened mother. What if they don't believe me? Victoria asked when they were finally home, Royal asleep in her bassinet, Tamsin having left after assuring them both that Royal had been perfect all day. Then we deal with that. But Victoria, regardless of what the jury decides, I believe you. I've seen the evidence. I've lived with the consequences of Sable's control. Nothing a defense attorney says changes what I know to be true. Promise me something, anything. Promise that if Sable is acquitted, you won't blame yourself. You won't spiral into guilt about trusting the wrong person or missing the signs. I can't promise that. Try. Because Connor, whether a jury convicts Sable or not, you survived. We survived. We built something real from the wreckage. That matters more than any verdict. He pulled her close, and they stood in the small apartment holding each other while Royal slept peacefully, oblivious to the legal battle being waged around her existence. I love you, Connor said quietly. The words surprised them both. Victoria pulled back to look at him. What? I love you? I don't know exactly when it happened. Maybe when you walked away from me because I hadn't earned you yet. Maybe when you handed me Royal for the first time. maybe during one of the 1,000 small moments we've shared over these months. But I love you, and I needed to say it, because leaving it unsaid when tomorrow's uncertainty feels wrong. Tears filled Victoria's eyes. I love you too. I think I have for months, but I was too scared to admit it, too afraid of what loving you might cost. And now I'm still scared, but I'm more scared of not saying it when I have the chance. Connor kissed her then, soft and deep, a claim and a promise simultaneously. When they broke apart, both were breathing hard. Connor? Yeah. Tomorrow you testify. After that, closing arguments, then we wait for a verdict. However long that takes, days, weeks, I need you to know something. What? This. She gestured to the apartment, to Royal, to the life they'd built. This is already my happily ever after. Whatever the jury decides, whatever happens with your company, whether we face more challenges or smooth sailing, this is enough. You're enough. We're enough. Victoria, I need you to hear that, because I think you carry so much guilt about not being there for Royal's first 13 days, about trusting Sable for so long, about all the ways you think you failed. But from where I'm standing, you've succeeded at the only thing that really matters. You chose to be better, and you keep choosing it. Every single day, Connor had to close his eyes against the burn of tears. I don't deserve you. That's not how love works. It's not about deserving. It's about choosing. And I choose you. I choose you too. They made love that night, slow and tender, relearning each other after weeks of careful boundaries, celebrating the words they'd finally said aloud, taking comfort in physical connection before tomorrow's uncertainty. Later, lying tangled together in the darkness, Victoria traced patterns on Connor's chest. When this is all over, the trial, the corporate battle, all of it, what do you want our life to look like? Connor thought about it carefully. I want mornings like we have now, coffee together, taking turns with Royal, neither of us having to choose between family and work because we've built something sustainable. I want to grow old in Harbour's Rest, watching Royal grow up in a community that values people over profit. I want to prove that success doesn't require sacrificing the things that matter. That sounds perfect. What do you want? The same. Plus maybe a house with a yard where Royal can play. A workspace where I can continue my restoration work. More children, eventually, when we're ready. The ordinary things that most people take for granted, but that feel like miracles to me. We'll have all of that. I promise. Don't promise what you can't guarantee. Then I promise I'll work toward it. Every day. Is that better? That's perfect. They fell asleep holding each other, drawing strength for tomorrow from the certainty of today, that, whatever came next, they'd face it together. Connor Drake had addressed hostile boardrooms, faced down corporate raiders, delivered keynotes to thousands. None of it prepared him for the witness stand. Catherine Wells began gently, establishing his relationship with Sable, childhood connection through his father, her steady presence after his father's death, the trust that had built over decades. Mr. Drake, did you notice symptoms of illness in the months before Miss Rhodes witnessed the alleged poisoning? Yes. Headaches that started around December, 9 months before I met Victoria. Dizzy spells. Fatigue that I attributed to stress. Stomach problems that 3 different specialists couldn't diagnose because they were looking for disease, not deliberate contamination. Did these symptoms have any pattern? They were worse after my morning coffee. Always. But I assumed it was caffeine sensitivity developing with age, or stress-related acid reflux. It never occurred to me that someone I trusted completely would be systematically poisoning me. When did you first suspect poisoning? Connor's jaw tightened. When Victoria told me. Before that moment, despite all the symptoms, despite feeling progressively worse, it never crossed my mind that someone, especially someone I'd trusted my entire adult life, would deliberately hurt me. Why do you think Miss Minton did this? Objection, Diane called. Speculation. I'll rephrase, Catherine said smoothly. Mr. Drake, based on your communications with Miss Minton after these allegations came to light, what was her stated justification? She claimed she was protecting me. From women who wanted my money, from business partners she deemed untrustworthy, from anyone who might distract me from building Drake Industries' legacy. She said everything she did was for my own good. Catherine introduced evidence, the email filters showing Victoria's messages being automatically diverted to a folder Sable controlled, the phone records showing blocked calls, the calendar entries Connor had never authorized that prevented him from being available when Victoria tried to reach him. Mr. Drake, you've made significant changes to your life in recent months. Can you describe them? This was crucial, proving that Connor was a reliable witness, not someone whose judgment was clouded by infatuation. I've restructured my entire life around being present for my daughter. I relocated from Manhattan to Harbor's Rest 4 days a week. I've delegated operational control of Drake Industries to division heads I trust, maintaining strategic oversight without the micromanagement that characterized my previous leadership style. And I've learned to ask for help instead of demanding it, to show up consistently instead of making grand gestures. Some might say you've been manipulated into these changes. Some would be wrong. These changes have made me a better father and a better leader. The fact that they align with Victoria's needs doesn't make them manipulation. It makes them healthy partners. I'm more focused, more strategic, and more effective now than I was when I tried to control every detail of my company and my life. Catherine yielded to cross-examination. Diane Northwood approached with the same calculated friendliness she'd used with Victoria. Mr. Drake, you're telling this jury that a woman you've known for less than a year has convinced you to restructure your entire life, abandon your Manhattan residence, and accept a child as yours based on her word? No. I'm telling this jury that discovering I'm a father made me reevaluate my priorities, and we did paternity testing through Ellison Independent Laboratories, a nationally accredited facility with no financial ties to Drake Industries. But you paid for that testing. I paid the standard fee that anyone would pay. The lab's integrity doesn't depend on who writes the check. It depends on their scientific protocols and accreditation standards. Let's talk about your relationship with my client. Sable Minton has been part of your life for how long? 22 years. She guided you through university. She helped with research and organization, yes. Advised you through your father's death. She was supportive during a difficult time. Helped you navigate countless business decisions, all of which proved successful. Many of which proved successful. Not all. And yet you're asking this jury to believe that this woman, who devoted over 2 decades to supporting you, suddenly decided to poison you. Why? Connor met Diane's eyes steadily. Because I was making choices she disagreed with. Because I was developing relationships she couldn't control. Because somewhere along the way she stopped seeing me as a person and started seeing me as a project to manage. Or perhaps Miss Rhodes convinced you of this narrative because it served her purposes, eliminated the one person who might question her motives. Victoria convinced me of nothing. The evidence convinced me. The arsenic in my coffee samples, the intercepted communications, the systematic isolation, those aren't narratives. They're documented facts. Facts that emerged after you began a relationship with a woman who needed funding for her projects. I funded Victoria's restoration work on merit, before I knew anything about alleged poisoning. The grant was awarded by a committee of 7 people, not by my personal decree. How generous of you. Objection. Catherine Wells stood. Counsel is testifying, not questioning. Sustained. Ms. Northwood, move on. Diane switched tactics. Mr. Drake, you're currently facing a hostile takeover attempt, correct? Objection, Catherine said immediately. Relevance. I'm establishing bias, Your Honor. Mr. Drake has significant financial incentive to maintain his current narrative. Judge Stevens considered. I'll allow it. But make your point quickly, counsel. Mr. Drake, you're fighting to maintain control of Drake Industries. Correct? I'm fighting a takeover attempt that undervalues the company and would hurt shareholders long term. And this trial, these allegations against Miss Minton, they generate sympathy, don't they? Poor Connor Drake, victimized by his trusted advisor. That plays well with shareholders who might otherwise question your recent lifestyle changes. Connor's voice went cold. Are you suggesting I fabricated poisoning allegations for corporate advantage? I'm suggesting you have multiple motivations for supporting Victoria Rhodes's narrative. I have one motivation, the truth. And the truth is that Sable Minton poisoned me, isolated me, and interfered with my right to know about my own daughter. Corporate politics have nothing to do with it. The cross-examination continued another 30 minutes, with Diane trying to establish that Connor was either manipulated by Victoria or using the trial for business advantage. But Connor held firm, his testimony consistent, his demeanor credible. When he finally stepped down, Catherine called her surprise witness, someone even Victoria hadn't known about. The prosecution calls Patricia Donovan, a woman in her early 50s, professionally dressed with an air of competence, took the stand. Connor recognized her immediately. She'd been a VP at Drake Industries 5 years ago, forced out in what Sable had called a necessary restructuring. Ms. Donovan, can you describe your role at Drake Industries? I was Vice President of Strategic Development from 2015 to 2019. I reported directly to the executive team and worked closely with Mr. Drake on long-term planning. Why did you leave the company? My position was eliminated. I was told it was a restructuring, offered a generous severance package with a strict non-disclosure agreement, and essentially forced out. What led to this restructuring? Patricia's expression hardened. I raised concerns about Sable Minton's behavior. She was making decisions without executive approval, controlling Connor's access to information, interfering with strategic partnerships. When I brought these concerns to the board, suddenly my position became redundant. Did you sign the NDA? Yes. I had 3 children to support and couldn't afford a legal battle against Drake Industries' resources. So why are you here now? Because after I left Drake Industries, I started having health problems, severe headaches, fatigue, digestive issues. My doctor ran extensive tests and found elevated levels of heavy metals in my blood work, including arsenic. The courtroom erupted. Judge Stevens called for order. Catherine introduced Patricia's medical records, showing elevated arsenic levels documented 6 months before her departure, declining rapidly after she left Drake Industries. Ms. Donovan, did you share office space with Connor Drake during your tenure? Yes. My office was on the same floor, and I frequently worked in the executive suite. Sable often made coffee for the entire executive team, not just Connor. Did you ever witness her adding anything to that coffee? I saw her adding what she called wellness supplements. She said they were vitamins and adaptogens to help with stress. I never questioned it. Why would I? And your arsenic levels returned to normal within 6 months of leaving the company and no longer consuming anything Sable prepared. Diane's cross-examination was aggressive, suggesting Patricia was lying for revenge, that her medical issues were environmental contamination, that she'd fabricated this story after learning about Connor's case. But Patricia held firm. I have nothing to gain by being here except peace of mind that I'm preventing what almost happened to me from happening to anyone else. Sable Minton is dangerous. She nearly destroyed my health, definitely destroyed my career, and I won't stand by while she claims innocence. The testimony was devastating. 1 victim could be explained away. 2 victims with documented arsenic poisoning, both of whom had questioned Sable's control over Connor. That was a pattern. The prosecution rested its case. Diane called Sable to testify in her own defense, a calculated risk. Sable took the stand composed and confident, dressed in a soft grey suit that projected professionalism. "Miss Minton, can you explain your relationship with Connor Drake?" "Connor is family," Sable said, her voice warm with what seemed like genuine affection. "His father was my godfather. When Mr. Drake died, I promised I would help Connor however I could. That became my life's purpose, protecting him, ensuring he achieved everything his father dreamed for him. The prosecution has painted you as controlling. How do you respond? Protection looks like control to people who don't understand what's at stake. Connor Drake runs a billion-dollar company. He's a target for exploitation. Gold diggers, corporate spies, competitors who'd destroy him if they could. My job was to filter threats. And Victoria Rhodes?" Sable's expression tightened almost imperceptibly. Miss Rhodes appeared when Connor was vulnerable. She had a failing project that needed funding. She pursued him strategically, positioned herself as intellectually compatible, then discovered pregnancy at precisely the moment when Connor's emotional state made him susceptible. "Did you add anything to Mr. Drake's coffee on June 3rd? "I added wellness supplements, B vitamins, magnesium and adaptogens recommended by a naturopathic physician. I did this openly, with Connor's knowledge, trying to support his health during a stressful time." The prosecution claims these supplements contained arsenic. The prosecution is mistaken. I added natural supplements, nothing more. If arsenic appeared in those samples, Victoria Rhodes put it there to support her narrative. And Patricia Donovan. Miss Donovan was a disgruntled employee who'd been underperforming for months. Her position was legitimately eliminated. Her claims now are revenge, nothing more. Catherine's cross-examination was surgical. "Miss Minton, you said Connor knew about these supplements. Can you provide any documentation, email, text message, written consent, showing Connor explicitly agreed to you adding substances to his coffee?" Sable hesitated. "It was verbal consent. We had an understanding you can't document. Convenient. Let's talk about Patricia Donovan. You said her position was eliminated due to performance issues. Can you provide the performance reviews that justified her termination? That would be confidential, personnel. We've subpoenaed those records. Would you like me to show the jury that Miss Donovan's last 3 reviews were exemplary? That her position was eliminated within 2 weeks of her raising concerns about your behavior?" Sable's composure cracked slightly. The timing was coincidental. Was it coincidental that her arsenic levels returned to normal after leaving Drake Industries? Environmental factors. In a building that you also occupied. Yet only people who questioned your authority developed mysterious illnesses. Catherine pulled up a chart showing correlation. 6 executives who'd challenged Sable's decisions over the past decade, 4 of whom had experienced unexplained health problems before leaving Drake Industries. "Miss Minton, this isn't protection. This is a pattern of systematically removing anyone who threatened your control, using methods ranging from career sabotage to poisoning. And when Connor Drake, the person you claimed to care about most, began making choices you didn't approve of, you escalated to attempted murder. That's not. Did you or did you not sign for a certified letter addressed to Connor Drake from Victoria Rhodes on June 25th? I don't recall. Catherine showed the return receipt with Sable's signature. This is your signature, correct? Yes, but did you give that letter to Connor Drake? I determined it was inappropriate. You intercepted personal mail intended for Connor Drake, marked it refused, and returned it without his knowledge. Correct? I was protecting, you were controlling. No further questions. The jury looked disturbed. Sable stepped down looking less composed than when she'd started. Closing arguments came next. Catherine was passionate and precise, walking the jury through the evidence piece by piece. Toxicology showing arsenic, pattern of symptoms, intercepted communications, Patricia Donovan's corroborating testimony. Ladies and gentlemen, this isn't about a jealous ex-girlfriend or a disgruntled employee. This is about systematic abuse of trust, deliberate poisoning, and attempted murder. Sable Minton didn't just work for Connor Drake, she controlled him. And when that control was threatened, she tried to eliminate the threat. Victoria Rhodes is alive today because she was careful, because she documented, because she protected her daughter, by hiding when telling the truth meant danger. That's not manipulation, that's survival. Diane's closing focused on reasonable doubt, the gap in chain of custody for the samples, Victoria's financial motives, the convenience of accusations against the one person who questioned Victoria's narrative. The prosecution wants you to believe a dramatic story because drama is compelling, but your job isn't to be entertained. It's to evaluate evidence objectively, and the evidence shows reasonable doubt. Maybe Sable Minton was overly protective. Maybe she made poor decisions about intercepting communications. But attempted murder? That requires proof beyond reasonable doubt, and all you have is Victoria Rhodes's word, samples she controlled for weeks, and circumstantial correlations that could have alternate explanations. The jury deliberated for 3 days. Connor and Victoria waited in a courthouse conference room, taking turns pacing, neither able to focus on anything except that closed door separating them from the verdict. "Whatever happens," Victoria said on the third day, "we did everything right. We told the truth. We provided evidence. We can't control what 12 strangers decide." "I know. Doesn't make the waiting easier." The door opened. Catherine Wells appeared, her expression carefully neutral. "Jury's back." The courtroom was packed when Judge Stevens called for the verdict. Connor and Victoria sat in the front row, hands linked, both barely breathing as the jury foreman stood. "On the charge of attempted murder in the first degree, how do you find?" "Guilty." Victoria's breath caught. Connor's grip tightened. "On the charge of conspiracy to commit murder?" "Guilty. On charges of fraud, forgery, and obstruction of justice?" "Guilty on all counts." Sable Minton's face remained impassive, but her hands shook as she gripped the defense table. Diane immediately requested a mistrial, citing prejudicial testimony. Judge Stevens denied it. Sentencing was scheduled for 3 weeks later. Outside the courthouse, Catherine faced the press with Connor and Victoria flanking her. "Justice was served today," Catherine said firmly. Sable Minton used her position of trust to systematically poison Connor Drake. She isolated him from genuine relationships, intercepted critical communications, and endangered his life. Today's verdict confirms that no amount of claimed protection justifies attempted murder. A reporter shouted, "Mr. Drake, how do you feel?" Connor stepped forward. "I feel relieved, relief that the truth came out, relief that Victoria's bravery in testifying was recognized, and relief that my daughter will grow up knowing her mother's strength stopped someone dangerous." "Victoria, what do you want to say to other victims of manipulation?" Victoria squared her shoulders. "Trust your instincts, document everything, and know that speaking truth to power is terrifying but necessary. You're not alone, you're not crazy, and people will believe you if you give them evidence and courage." They fielded a few more questions before security ushered them to Connor's car. "It's over," Victoria said as they pulled away from the courthouse. "The trial is over. Now we just have sentencing, and then life. Life sounds good. Life sounds perfect. You've been with Connor and Victoria through every challenge. Hit that like button if you're celebrating this victory with them. Subscribe to Mr. Steele Rich Stories for moral-rich narratives about people who choose truth over convenience, who fight for justice even when it's hard, who build love through consistent action. Share this story with someone who needs to see that speaking up against manipulation matters. Drop a comment about which moment hit you hardest. Now let's see what happens when Connor faces his final corporate battle. 3 weeks after the verdict, Sable Minton stood before Judge Stevens for sentencing. The courtroom was less crowded this time. The dramatic testimony was over, leaving only the administrative conclusion of justice. Catherine Wells presented victim impact statements. Connor spoke first, his voice steady but weighted with emotion. "Your Honor, Sable Minton didn't just poison my body. She poisoned 22 years of my life. She isolated me, controlled me, and convinced me that her management was protection. When I finally started making choices for myself, she escalated to attempted murder. Because of her actions, I missed the first 13 days of my daughter's life. Because of her, Victoria Rhodes had to hide during her pregnancy, terrified for her child's safety. The physical symptoms I experienced have mostly resolved. The betrayal of trust will take much longer to heal." Victoria spoke next. "I'm not the primary victim here, but I want the court to understand what it's like to witness poisoning and know that speaking up means becoming a target. I want every woman who discovers the dangerous truth to know that staying silent isn't the only option. Sable Minton tried to silence me by intercepting my communications, and when that failed, I had to silence myself by disappearing. That's what unchecked control does. It makes truth dangerous. I hope this sentence sends a message that manipulation and control have consequences." Patricia Donovan spoke last. "I lost my career because I questioned Sable Minton's authority. I suffered health consequences that I'm still recovering from years later. But mostly, I lost the confidence to speak up when something's wrong. I teach my children to tell the truth. But I stayed silent about my own poisoning because I was afraid of Drake Industries' resources. That ends today. I'm speaking up, and I hope others will too." Diane Northwood made a final plea for leniency, arguing that Sable had devoted her life to Connor's success, that her actions came from misguided loyalty rather than malice. Judge Stevens was unmoved. "Miss Minton, this court has heard extensive evidence about your systematic abuse of power. You didn't just poison Connor Drake once in a fit of passion. You did it daily, methodically, over months. You isolated him from relationships you couldn't control. You sabotaged the careers of people who questioned you. You intercepted personal mail and communications. Your attorney argues this was misguided protection. I find it was calculated control that escalated to attempted murder." He sentenced her to 23 years in state prison, consecutive sentences for attempted murder, conspiracy, fraud, and obstruction. No possibility of parole for 18 years. Sable's composure finally shattered. She looked at Connor with something between desperation and fury. "I did everything for you. Everything. And you chose her over 2 decades of loyalty." "No," Connor said quietly but firmly. "You chose control over honesty. That's not loyalty, that's possession. And I'm done being owned." Sable was led away in handcuffs, and the chapter closed. Outside, Victoria sagged against Connor. "It's really over now. It's really over. What happens next?" "Next, we go home. We focus on Royal. I finish dealing with the corporate situation, and we figure out what life looks like when we're not constantly in crisis mode." The drive back to Harbour's Rest was quiet, both processing the finality of Sable's sentence. 23 years. Sable would be in her 60s when released, her life defined by the control she'd tried to maintain and the consequences that followed. At home, Tamsin had Royal fed, changed, and happily played on her activity mat. "How'd it go?" Tamsin asked, reading their exhausted expressions. 23 years, Connor said simply. "Good. She earned every day of it." Tamsin gathered her things. "I'm going to leave you 3 to decompress. Royal's been perfect." She rolled from her back to her side today, which isn't quite rolling over, but it's close. She's getting stronger every day. After Tamsin left, Connor sat on the floor beside Royal's playmat, watching her reach for dangling toys with increasing coordination. At nearly 3 months old, she was becoming more alert, more responsive, more obviously her own person, rather than just a tiny bundle of needs. "Hey, beautiful girl," Connor murmured. "You're getting so big. Soon you'll be rolling over, then sitting up, then crawling everywhere and getting into everything. And I'm going to be here for all of it." Victoria joined them on the floor, the three of them in a small circle on the worn carpet of her modest apartment. "We need to talk about something," she said. "That sounds ominous." "It's not. Or maybe it is. I don't know." She took a breath. "Connor, you've been staying here 4 nights a week for almost 3 months now. You've essentially moved in except for the nights you're in Manhattan. And I think we should make that official. You want me to move in? I want us to find a place together. This apartment was fine when it was just me, but it's cramped with 3 of us, plus all of Royal's equipment. I want a real home. For all of us." Connor's heart did something complicated in his chest. "You want to buy a house, together. I want us to build something permanent. Not your house that I move into, not my apartment that you're crashing in, our home. Both our names on the deed, both our choices in the design, a real partnership in every sense." "Victoria Rhodes, are you asking me to cohabitate officially? I'm asking if you're ready to stop testing whether this works and start building like it does." Connor kissed her, soft and sure. "Yes, absolutely yes. Let's find a house. Let's make it ours. Let's build the life we want instead of the life we're testing." They started house hunting the following week, bringing Royal along to viewings in her carrier, imagining futures in every empty room they walked through. The house they found was modest by Connor's standards. 3 bedrooms, 1.5 baths, a small yard on the edge of Harbour's Rest with views of the park where they'd opened Royal's first chapter together. It needed work. The kitchen was outdated, the bathroom fixtures were ancient, the yard was overgrown. "It's perfect," Victoria said, standing in the empty living room. "It needs significant renovation. It needs love." "There's a difference." They made an offer that day, both their names on all documents, both contributing what they could afford, building equity together, rather than Connor simply buying and Victoria living in his space. The corporate situation resolved itself 3 weeks later. Lawrence Thompson's takeover bid collapsed when Connor's distributed leadership model produced quarterly results that exceeded projections. Employee satisfaction was at an all-time high, client retention improved, decision-making speed increased. Bradford called with the news. "Thompson's withdrawing his offer. The shareholders you were worried about. They just released a joint statement supporting your leadership approach. You won, we won," Connor corrected. "The company won because we proved there's a better way to lead than constant CEO heroics. What's next for you?" "Next, I'm making the 3-day Manhattan schedule permanent. We're hiring a COO to handle day-to-day operations, while I focus on strategy and vision. And I'm buying a house in Harbour's Rest, where I'll be raising my daughter." "You're really staying there." "I'm really staying here. This is home now." 6 months later, Royal Rhodes Drake celebrated her first birthday in the backyard of their new house. The kitchen had been renovated, the bathroom updated, the yard transformed into a space for a toddler to explore safely. Half of Harbour's Rest attended, Myrtle with her famous casserole, Coral with lemon bars, Juniper with flowers from her shop, Tamsin with age-appropriate toys that would help Royal's development, Sheriff Delaney, Elias, the neighbours who'd watched this unconventional family form and had quietly supported them through every challenge. Several Drake Industries board members made the trip from Manhattan. Bradford, Jennifer Park, who'd assisted Catherine during the trial, Thomas Whitfield, who'd once been Connor's harshest critic, but now championed the distributed leadership model to other CEOs. Royal sat in her high chair, face covered in cake, absolutely delighted with the mess she was making. Connor and Victoria stood on either side, taking 1,000 photos, both grinning like fools. "She's perfect," Connor said, wiping frosting from Royal's nose for the 3rd time. "She's a disaster," Victoria countered, laughing. "Look at her. She's got cake in her hair, on her clothes, somehow on her feet. A perfect disaster." Victoria leaned into Connor's side, and he wrapped his arm around her waist, both watching their daughter discover the joy of birthday cake. "Can I have everyone's attention?" Connor called out, and the backyard conversations quieted. He pulled Victoria to face him, suddenly nervous despite the certainty of what he was about to do. "A year ago, I stormed into Victoria's apartment angry and confused. I thought I was there to confront lies. Instead, I discovered my daughter and started learning what it means to be worthy of the people you love." He reached into his pocket, pulling out a small velvet box. "I've been carrying this for 3 months, waiting for the right moment. And I realized the right moment isn't some manufactured perfect scenario. It's this. Surrounded by people who've watched us build something real, covered in birthday cake with our daughter between us making happy sounds." He opened the box to reveal a simple gold band with small diamonds, elegant but not ostentatious, chosen because Victoria had once mentioned she preferred understated jewelry. "Victoria Rhodes, will you marry me? Not because we need to for Royal's sake, not because it's expected, but because I want to spend the rest of my life choosing you every single day. Because partnership and romance and friendship all at once is the best thing I've ever known. Because you make me better. And I want to make it official." Victoria's eyes filled with tears. "You're proposing at our daughter's first birthday party." "I'm proposing at our daughter's first birthday party, covered in cake, in front of half the town. Is that a problem?" "It's perfect. And yes, obviously yes." Connor slid the ring onto her finger, and the backyard erupted in applause. Royal chose that moment to smear cake directly into her own face, making everyone laugh. "She approves," Myrtle called out. "Though her approval method needs work." The celebration continued into the evening. Children playing in the yard, adults sharing stories on the patio Connor had built himself with Bradford's surprisingly competent help. Royal being passed between admirers until she finally crashed to sleep in Connor's arms. Later, after guests had left, and Royal was in her crib upstairs in the nursery they'd painted together, Connor and Victoria sat on their back porch, watching the stars emerge over Harbour's Rest. "Mrs. Drake," Connor said, testing the sound of it. "I'm keeping Rhodes professionally," Victoria said, "but yes, Mrs. Victoria Rhodes Drake has a nice ring to it. When should we get married? No rush. We've already built a life. The wedding is just paperwork and a party, so we're engaged indefinitely. We're engaged until we feel like planning a wedding. Maybe next spring, maybe next fall, maybe next year. Whenever it feels right." Connor pulled her close, breathing in her scent, vanilla and something uniquely Victoria. I love you too, even when you propose at inappropriate times covered in cake, especially then." They sat in comfortable silence, hands linked, future stretching ahead of them no longer as a test, but as a certainty. They'd survived attempted murder, a trial, corporate warfare, and the chaos of new parenthood. They'd built something real through consistent choice and daily effort. "Connor? Yeah? Thank you. For what? For storming into my apartment that day. For seeing Royal and letting everything change. For choosing to be worthy instead of expecting to be enough. For building this with me. Thank you for demanding I earn you. For not settling for easy when you deserved better, for being brave enough to walk away and strong enough to let me come back. We're quite the team. The best team." Inside, Royal made small sounds through the baby monitor. Not distress, just the normal sleep noises that they'd learned to distinguish from actual needs. Both parents tensed automatically, ready to respond, then relaxed when she settled back into peaceful sleep. "She's okay," Victoria said. "She's perfect." "We're okay too. We're perfect. Don't get cocky. We still have terrible twos ahead of us. Teenage years, college anxiety, all of it. Bring it on. We'll handle it together. Promise? Promise. Every day, every challenge, every moment, together." They stayed outside until the temperature dropped, then went inside to their home. Not Connor's mansion or Victoria's modest apartment, but their house, built through compromise and choice and the daily decision to be partners in every sense. In the master bedroom, Connor watched Victoria move through her nighttime routine with the familiarity of months of shared space. She caught him watching and smiled. "What?" "Just thinking about how different my life is now. A year ago, I was alone in a Manhattan penthouse, being poisoned by someone I trusted, missing connections I didn't know I needed. Now I'm here, in Harbour's Rest, with you and Royal, and I've never been happier. No regrets. Not a single one. You. Only that I waited 13 days to tell you about Royal. But even that, it led us here. So maybe no regrets after all. Just choices and consequences, and choosing better every day." "And choosing better every day," Connor agreed. They fell asleep tangled together, the baby monitor on the nightstand, the sounds of Harbour's Rest drifting through open windows, someone's dog barking, distant laughter, the ordinary sounds of life being lived. In the morning, Royal would wake them too early. There would be bottles to prepare, diapers to change, breakfast to make while juggling a fussy baby. Connor would video conference with Bradford about quarterly projections while wearing spit-up on his shoulder. Victoria would work on her restoration proposals while Royal napped. They'd have lunch at the Harbour's Rest diner where Coral would inevitably bring extra lemon bars for the baby to grow into. It would be ordinary, unglamorous, perfect, because this daily choice to show up, to be present, to build something real through consistent action rather than grand gestures. This was the life Connor Drake had never known he wanted until Victoria Rhodes demanded he earn it. And every single day he chose it again. Every single day they both chose it, together. Connor Drake sat cross-legged on the floor of the living room, surrounded by 3 children. Royal, now 5, and fiercely independent with opinions about everything. Mason, 3 years old, with Connor's analytical mind and Victoria's stubbornness, and baby Lydia, 6 months old and already showing signs of ruling the entire household. "Daddy, tell us the story," Royal demanded, as she did every few weeks. "Which story, Princess? The one about how you and Mama fell in love. The real version, not the boring one." Connor looked up to find Victoria in the doorway, pregnant with their 4th child, hand resting on the gentle swell of her belly, smiling at the chaos. "Well," he began, settling Mason more comfortably in his lap, while Lydia gnawed on a teething ring beside him. "Once upon a time, there was a man who thought he had everything but actually had nothing that mattered. He lived in a tall tower, worked too much, and trusted the wrong person. Then one day he met a woman who changed everything. He told them the age-appropriate version, how Mama was smart and brave, how Daddy had to learn to be worthy, how discovering Royal had changed his entire life, how sometimes the best things come from the hardest challenges. "And then you got married and lived happily ever after?" Mason asked, even though he'd heard this story dozens of times. "Not exactly," Victoria said, joining them on the floor despite her pregnancy making it awkward. "Happily ever after isn't a destination where everything's perfect forever. It's a practice. It's choosing each other when it's hard. It shows up even when you're tired. It's building a life together, one day at a time." "That sounds boring," Royal declared. Connor and Victoria exchanged a look, the kind of wordless communication that came from 5 years of partnership, from weathering every challenge together, from choosing each other through ordinary days and extraordinary ones. "Maybe it is boring from the outside," Connor said. But from the inside, it's everything. Royal lost interest, wandering off to play with the elaborate castle Connor had built with her the previous weekend. Mason followed, and Lydia decided she needed feeding right now based on the intensity of her sudden fussing. Connor handed the baby to Victoria, who settled into the rocking chair they'd moved from apartment to first house to this larger home they'd bought 2 years ago when Mason arrived, and space became critical. "You know what I love about this?" Victoria said, nursing Lydia while keeping one eye on Mason, who was attempting to climb furniture. "What?" "That happily ever after for us means chaos. 3 kids, almost 4. You work 3 days a week in Manhattan, 2 days remote. I run a coastal restoration consulting firm from the converted garage. Constant noise, constant mess, constant exhaustion. And it's perfect. It's perfect," Connor agreed, intercepting Mason before he could climb the bookshelf. "Hey buddy, let's find something safer to climb. Daddy, I'm going to be strong like you." That evening, after the children were bathed and storied and finally, blessedly asleep, Connor and Victoria collapsed on their back porch with glasses of wine, sparkling cider for Victoria because of the pregnancy. "I got a call from Catherine Wells today," Victoria said. "Yeah? How's she doing?" "Good. She's working on another case, a similar pattern of control and poisoning. She wanted to know if we'd be willing to talk to the victim, share our story." "What did you tell her?" I said yes. Because if our story helps even one person recognize control disguised as protection, it's worth reliving. We have. Royal starts kindergarten in the fall. Mason will be in preschool. The new baby comes in 4 months. Your distributed leadership model has been adopted by 6 other Fortune 500 companies. My restoration work just secured its biggest grant yet. We're doing okay. Better than okay. Better than okay, Victoria agreed. They sat in comfortable silence, watching Harbour's rest settle into the evening, the town that had welcomed them, supported them, watched them build this unconventional life. "Connor, do you ever miss it? Old life? The Manhattan penthouse, the constant work, the power and control?" He thought about it honestly. "Sometimes I miss the simplicity of it. When my biggest problem was quarterly earnings and hostile takeovers, not figuring out how to explain death to a 5-year-old because her fish died, or managing 3 kids under 5 while you're pregnant with number 4, or navigating kindergarten social politics. But I wouldn't trade this for anything. That life was simple because it was empty. This life is complicated because it's full. And I'll take full and complicated over empty and simple every single time." Victoria squeezed his hand. "Good answer. I've had years to practice." Inside, Lydia started crying. Both parents sighed simultaneously. "My turn," Connor said, standing. "You're growing as a human. I'll handle the midnight crying." He went inside, lifted Lydia from her crib, and walked her through the house, past Royal's room where she slept surrounded by stuffed animals and books, past Mason's room with its chaos of toys and trucks, past the nursery they were preparing for baby number 4. "Shh, beautiful girl," he murmured to Lydia, swaying gently. "Let's not wake your siblings. They need sleep, and Daddy needs at least a few hours before someone else needs something." Lydia's cries softened to whimpers, then hiccups, then peaceful breathing as she settled against his chest. Connor stood in the hallway of their home, a home they'd chosen together, renovated together, filled with the beautiful chaos of the family they'd built, and felt the profound rightness of it. This was a success. Not the quarterly earnings, or the building with his name on it, or the board meetings, or the shareholder value. This, standing in a hallway at midnight with a sleeping baby on his shoulder, a pregnant wife on the porch, 3 children dreaming in their beds, a life built through daily choice and consistent action. This was everything. Victoria appeared in the hallway, backlit by the porch light. "Is she okay?" "She's perfect. They're all perfect. You're perfect." I'm exhausted, pregnant, haven't slept through the night in 6 years, and I'm pretty sure I have spit up in my hair, still perfect. She crossed to him, carefully so as not to wake Lydia, and kissed him softly. I love you, Connor Drake. I love you, Victoria Rhodes Drake. Even with spit up in my hair, especially with spit up in your hair. Because that spit up represents this life we're living. The beautiful, messy, exhausting, perfect life we're choosing every single day. You've gotten very philosophical about bodily fluids. Fatherhood does that to a man. They stood together in the hallway, Lydia asleep between them, the house quiet around them, the future stretching ahead with all its complications and joys and challenges. Ready to do it all again tomorrow? Victoria asked. Every day. For the rest of our lives, that's a long time, not nearly long enough. Connor carried Lydia back to her crib, settled her gently, and watched her sleep for a moment. This tiny person who depended on him, who trusted him, who'd someday grow up and make her own choices and build her own life. He hoped she'd learn the lessons he'd learned through such difficulty, that control isn't protection, that isolation isn't safety, that real strength comes from vulnerability and partnership, and the willingness to be worthy, rather than expecting to be enough. He hoped she'd find someone who demanded she earn them. He hoped she'd be brave enough to walk away from what's easy to fight for what's right. He hoped she'd build a life full of beautiful, ordinary moments, rather than impressive, empty achievements. But mostly, he hoped she'd know she was loved, fiercely, completely, without condition, by parents who'd chosen each other every day and had chosen her just as certainly. In the master bedroom, Connor found Victoria already asleep, exhausted from a day of managing 3 children while pregnant with a 4th. He slid into bed beside her carefully, and even in sleep, she moved toward him, her body recognizing his presence. Tomorrow will bring you challenges. Royal would have opinions about breakfast. Mason would attempt death-defying feats of climbing. Lydia would need constant attention. The 4th baby would make Victoria uncomfortable as the pregnancy progressed. There would be work calls and restoration proposals, and the endless logistics of managing a household with multiple children. But they'd face it together. Every day, we choose each other. Every day showing up. Every day building this beautiful, complicated, messy, perfect life. And Connor Drake, who'd once measured success in billions and buildings and board seats, now measured it in midnight feedings and bedtime stories and the weight of a sleeping baby on his shoulder. And he'd never been richer. If this story of earned love, second chances, and choosing presence over power moved you, please share it with someone who needs to hear it. Hit that subscribe button for Mr. Steele Rich Stories. We bring you moral-rich narratives about real people making hard choices, building authentic relationships, and discovering that success isn't about what you achieve, but who you become. Drop a comment about which moment resonated most with you. Was it Connor's transformation, Victoria's courage, the covenant they built together, their decision to measure life by presence rather than achievement? Like this video, if you believe that showing up matters more than showing off, that consistency beats grand gestures, and that real love is built through daily choice. Thank you for being part of Connor and Victoria's journey. Thank you for believing that people can change, that second chances matter, and that the best stories aren't about perfection. They're about people choosing to be better, one day at a time. See you in the next story. Until then, keep choosing the people who matter, keep showing up, keep building the life you actually want, not just the life that looks impressive. This is Mr. Steele Rich Stories, reminding you that the best happily ever after isn't a destination, it's a practice.